Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Recovery Hour here on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. I am one co-host, Rod Pedersen, person in recovery coach and interventionist. Pleased to be joined, as always, by co-host, addictions counselor Rand Teed for episode number 31 of this program on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, where we talk about all aspects of recovery. And we've got a lot of themes, Rand, some that I'm not sure that 60 minutes are going to be enough to get through here today or tonight. Canadian Mental Health Association Mental Health Week with the theme of empathy this week. I think we could do an hour on that. We're going to talk about smoking and vaping with Dr. Murray Kelly. And maybe if we go any further, would you mind, Rand, telling us about this guy, Dr. Murray Kelly? Because I think he is one cool cat, and it seems like you guys have you got a bit of a history together?
Yeah, we've known each other for a while. Murray's from Ottawa. He's was one of the pioneers in Canada of developing smoking cessation programs. So he's worked in a variety of treatment centers and is one of the leading experts in the country in stopping tobacco use, nicotine addiction, those kinds of things. Interesting fella.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that he's got a lot to add. And I do want to mention, I'm broadcasting from Grey Eagle Resort and Casino out here in the beautiful Tsuut'ina Nation in the foothills of Alberta. And this is a shirt, Born Resilient, that our good friend Alan Keller was out here speaking. This is his clothing line. He was speaking at the Mental Health and Healing Conference here at Tsuut'ina this week. That was Monday. And then Jordan Tutu was speaking Tuesday. And I stopped in and saw some of that. And it was a wonderful presentation. So there's a lot of things to get to tonight, so let's go. I want to say this about the Canadian Mental Health Association Mental Health Week. I didn't realize that it was. Maybe you did. I mean, to me, every week is Mental Health Week. Every day is Mental Health Day. But when you hear the term empathy, I cringed a small bit only for this. And I think I can say this tonight on this show and people won't think that I'm nuts or lock me up. But with the spiritual advisors, I'm seeing a few of them. One of them said to me, "You are an extreme empath." That's what she said. And I don't know if that's a gift or a curse. I've kind of taken it as a gift, there's no doubt. But the term empathy, let's start there, Rand. It's a wonderful theme by the CMHA. But what are your thoughts when you hear that?
Well, empathy is the capacity to understand and relate to someone else's feelings. And I mean, that term empath is somebody that's particularly attuned to picking up on somebody else's feelings. So it's not a bad thing, but it's something that you need to be careful with, because it's really easy for you to start to take on other people's burdens, and that can start to affect you. I'm kind of similar, but you know, part of what we do is learn how to be attention, pay attention, understand people, but not let their hurt necessarily affect us. And to be empathetic is to really understand and relate to a person. And it doesn't mean you start telling them what to do or trying to fix things. It's really just being that person who can listen to what's going on. It's interesting, I've been working in a 3-day workshop with a group of kids that have been struggling in high schools. And yesterday and today, we were talking about, what hurts, what's going on. And all of the kids instantly related to each other because they all had similar experiences, similar feelings. And that allows you to be sort of more empathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the connection, and that's why I think you can help people when you get down on their level. But listen, that's why I say I could go on about empathy for a long time. But when I got my intervention training in New York, you know a couple of these names of people that were there. Earl Hightower, who was doing the training, and Bob Mary. Yeah, and Bob Marrier was doing Bob things. So Bob said about Earl, he goes, Earl's the kind of guy that can walk into a room and immediately sense the temperature in that room.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, big deal, so can I. I have, apparently it's a very rare trait.
Yeah.
When did you realize that you have this capacity for empathy as a human being?
I think I probably always had it. It took me a while to realize that I had it, because in order to really be empathetic, you have to start to understand yourself too. And I didn't get around to that till my sort of later 20s. I was just kind of busy doing stuff. And when we start to take a look at ourselves and take a look at how we tick, what hurts us, what bothers us, what gives us joy, when we start to really understand ourselves, that increases our capacity to understand other people.
Well, don't think that you were late to the party on that. I didn't get into it until my 40s, probably 2 years sober before I even realized it. And then, honestly, Rand, it would be, up until then, why would I want to help somebody if there wasn't something in it for me?
Yeah.
But then I started doing it, and then people were saying, why do you want to help people? You never have before. And I say, how about you don't worry about it? It feels good.
Yeah.
Would you not agree?
I totally agree. And empathy isn't necessarily about helping people. It's really just kind of being there for them, understanding and relating to their hurt. The helping stuff doesn't have to happen to be empathetic. So that's
Yep,
a little
fair.
bit of a distinction.
Yeah, but it helps.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Doesn't
It
hurt.
obviously helps. No, and that was I never realized that I had this ability either. Now, to the smoking and vaping. I'm interested in that. I'm more interested to sit back and listen to you and Murray talk when he comes on in the next segment. But what a wide topic, because I remember you invited me out some years ago. You were giving a tobacco conference, tobacco-free conference, or quitting smoking out in the valley.
Yeah,
And
actually,
I
Murray
said, well, I
came,
don't.
but Murray was out there for that.
Okay, and you said, I said I don't smoke or something, and I said something about chewing tobacco, and you said it's all the same.
Well, it's nicotine. So really what we're talking
Yeah.
about is nicotine addiction. And there's been a huge increase in adolescent nicotine addiction because of vaping. And if you look at the stats over the last 20 years or so, teenagers were getting smarter and smarter and not picking up cigarettes. So the promotion and the advertising against smoking that we had been doing, and Canadian Government, Mental Health Association, CAMH, Lung Association, all of those organizations that have been working against smoking, trying to educate people on its dangers, that was starting to work. That was starting to be effective. And it sort of lost its coolness. That would have terrified tobacco companies, because if teens don't start smoking as teenagers, there's much less likelihood that they're going to start smoking as adults. And so in order to guarantee their profit lines, tobacco companies needed to figure out a way to make smoking cool again. And so over the last, e-cigarettes started showing up about 2004, 2005 in various forms. And then it just exploded. All high schools are having huge issues with vaping, because for the most part, you can't smell it, or it smells like bubble gum or watermelon gummy or whatever. It doesn't have that distinct odor of a cigarette. And it takes under a minute to ingest nicotine from a vape, as opposed to 10 or 15 minutes to go outside and smoke a cigarette. So kids have these little electronic devices that some of them look like USB drives, some of them look like a pen. Looking at it, you don't really, you wouldn't even notice what it is. And, they'll stick their hand up, can I go to the bathroom? And they zip out in the hall or go to the bathroom, and their terminology is hit my vape, which gives them an instant nicotine hit. And I'll ask Murray about this, because he'll explain it better than I do. But the addictive process and how nicotine works in our brains, it's a really powerful drug.
So why are the kids starting now? Do they think it looks cool? Because
if you look at these devices, they are really interesting looking, and there's a huge social media push on vaping. People are sponsored to do vape tricks where they're blowing different kinds of smoke circles and stuff like that. If you look at at social media influencers. They're funded to push vape products. It's a lot less regulated than cigarettes. Like cigarettes, you can't, if you go in a store, you can't see them. Most of the vape stuff has been moved into vape stores, but talking to kids, there's not a significant level of enforcement on, checking ID to make sure that you're 18 so that you can purchase a product. But I mean, then they do the same thing as they do with alcohol or anything else. They get somebody who's a little bit older, or they get some false ID, and then they can go in and purchase this stuff. And I know we've had issues in schools where, a kid will buy 10 or 15 vapes and then sell them to his friends. And so it's an extremely lucrative market for the companies that are making money from it. And because it's so addictive, it's spreading very, very quickly.
So a lot of questions flooding my mind, and this is why I'm more interested to just hear you and Murray talk about it. But a couple things. One, I'm not a teen anymore. I guess when I was, I would have thought, exactly. Like that, sucking on a vape, I don't see the coolness in that. But this is not me speaking from any moral ground, because I still like chewing tobacco, and I started that because I was in that rodeo horse community, and all those guys had. What's cool about that?
Yeah.
But what are the kids saying about why they're starting?
Well, they're saying they like how it feels. So nicotine's a stimulant, and so you get a little buzz from it, and it's also a drug that works quickly and wears off quickly. So you very quickly start to go into withdrawal from it, and so then you go do it again. And because it's so easy, like if you have to walk outside, get a cigarette, whap yourself with body spray or whatever so you don't smell like smoke when you come back in, that's much more complicated. But you can go and use a nicotine vape device and nobody knows. You
smell fresh, you smell fruity.
Yeah.
And you get your hit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. And this is another question. Then my last one before we'll break and we'll bring Murray in. But I didn't smoke because my dad did, and I just thought it was disgusting. You know what I mean? That's not uncommon. I hated the smell of it. I hated every part of it. But he told me, he ended up quitting both. As you know, he quit drinking when I was 2, and he quit smoking when I was a teen. But he said quitting drinking 1,000 times easier than quitting smoking. What is it about that?
Well, I want to get in with. I'm not going to answer that right now. I want to get into that with Murray because I want to hear what he says. I started smoking when I was 10, and quit about 3 years after I quit everything else. And I had tried to quit smoking multiple times. I'd done quit smoking clinics. I'd had acupuncture. I tried Nicorette gum. I tried all sorts of things, and nothing was effective. And I think it was because I thought I should quit. I didn't really want to quit. And that's the discussion I kind of want to get into, Murray, is about creating that motivation.
Well, this is what they were hoping for. We opened the program talking about why you get into smoking and vaping. You guys will dissect that. And when we come at the final segment, we'll talk about perhaps how you can quit.
Can I just ask you a quick question about this mental health thing in Calgary?
Yeah.
How many people are there?
300-400.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
The room's full. If they had a bigger room, they'd probably fill
have
that.
more people. And
exactly. But it's
and that's exactly why we started doing this show, is to create more awareness. So anything like that happens, I think, is very, very valuable.
Well, yes. And when I keep hearing that a difference is being made and the advancements being pushed, it warms my heart.
Yeah.
Because we're in it just like this. You don't really see outside what's going on. So I'm glad to hear that, as for the same reasons you are. Dr. Murray Kelly joins us next. You're watching the Recovery Hour as we talk about CMHA Mental Health Week, their theme of empathy, smoking and vaping. We'll be right back on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Welcome back to the Recovery Hour, everybody, on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. It's our 31st episode, and I don't know why this one's got me all fired up and jacked up, but I like it, talking about smoking and vaping, and also Mental Health Week. And I know what I'm doing tonight, mentalhealthweek.ca. Be checking that out, and the hashtag #GetReal.
Yeah.
All right, Murray's been waiting a while. Rand, would you mind doing the honors of introducing this month's
I
guest?
would love to. If we can get him on the screen. So there he is. Hi, Murray.
There you go.
So everybody, this is Dr. Murray Kelly, a colleague and a friend of mine from Ottawa. So thanks for joining us, Murray.
No, it's my pleasure, and I
So-
always like to talk to you, Rod.
So can you explain nicotine addiction and talk about what it is like as a drug?
It's the most powerful drug humans have ever encountered. The brain absolutely loves nicotine, and once it gets a hold of it, doesn't take too. Dr. Gold says it takes about 200 cigarettes to develop a neural pathway in the human brain, and once it's developed, it can never be undone. The best you can do is put it to sleep. The minute you take a puff, it fires up again like a Christmas tree. So tobacco addiction is a neurological disorder in that sense that it has a half-life, very short half-life. So it's very powerful on the first puff. By the time you get to the end of the cigarette or halfway through one or two vape, your brain's already conditioned itself, and then you got to take a break or you can't get that jolt out of it. And then also it's a tool that a lot of children use to regulate in families that are dysfunctional. Often dad's not there, and if he is, it's a problem. And so they don't actually learn how to regulate that.
Do you want to explain
So-
regulate for those who aren't really clued into what that means?
Regulation is a set of skill sets that you develop when you're young, or you can do it. You develop when you're older as well, especially those of us in recovery. When things go bad, you need to know, you need to have you need to be able to cope and to be resilient and to know you'll get through that. And the skill set is a wide range of skills, but it boils down to basically coping with life when things go wrong.
So stress management, essentially.
Stress management is one of the tools that really help, but it's much deeper than that. It's if your parents smoke, you don't know how to regulate. So by the time you get to be 12 or 13, you're reaching for a cigarette because you can't handle things. The stress is getting too much. You don't know how to handle it, and that's what your mom and dad did. And it makes it very hard to quit because of that and the half-life. The half-life, if you don't have it, like if you're smoking cigarettes, if you're a high burner, meaning you have a high metabolic rate for nicotine itself, and I was one of those, I had to smoke 44 cigarettes a day just to stay normal.
So in
So,
lots of ways, it's not dissimilar from other substance problems. It becomes the tool that you use to manage how you're feeling. And
yeah,
when you're talking about parents teaching kids that, it's that parents don't know how to manage the situation, so they go smoke. So they're modeling that behavior, and that's all the
yeah,
kids learn. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. But and plus, the parents don't know that.
Yeah. No,
They
of
don't
course
know
not.
their. Yeah. So we weren't really in the addiction community. We weren't clued into regulation until psychotherapists clued us in when they became addicted to alcohol and taught us about regulation. It's been a really, really great thing. I work with youth as well, Rand, and that's one of the skills, the classes they do not ever miss, the regulation class. And I call it regulation to resilience and escape to calm peace, because the role alcohol plays is when you're 15 and you go out and you have your first bottle of lemon gin because you can't stand the alcohol and you said you'd never drink because your dad drank. Next thing you know, old Jug's a millionaire and you are craving a drink and a smoke, and they go together. And the combination of them are the number one killers, preventable killers of humans on Earth. 6.5 million people will die this year because of that.
So what do you find is the most effective way to help people extricate themselves from that addictive behavior and that addictive substance?
One of the things that I learned very quickly was that I do not judge them. I open my heart. I accept them. I bond with them. I relate to them, and I give them an opening. I have a saying that tobacco is harmful because of what it does to you, not because of what it does for you.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I say that, they go, "Oh, he understands. He knows what we're up against." And the youngest little girl at 9 and 10 years old, um, smoking, it's hard to deal with, but they need just as much help as a 19 or a 29 or 59-year-old person. And often you can get in there and give them, you have to build a relationship, because this is the most powerful drug humans have ever encountered. And when you take a puff of a cigarette on a very hot end of a hot cigarette, it vaporizes and smacks into your brain with far more power than mainline heroin. And if we only understood that in our culture, we treat tobacco. But there isn't a treatment center in Canada other than the one that we run that treats tobacco at the same time people are quitting drinking and other drugs. And it's really impactful on the recovery rate. The recovery rates go way up and the relapse rates go way down.
Well, I know the Last Door Treatment Center in New Westminster, as well as Westminster House, which is a sister program. Both of those
Yes.
programs are non-smoking, and
Yeah, I thought about
once you go in, you stop smoking.
yes.
And so, is quitting smoking, is that treating tobacco addiction?
Quitting smoking is a way to, I'd say quitting smoking and recovering from tobacco addiction. Quitting is more like a cessation idea,
Mm-hmm.
and cessation can only get you so far. And putting tobacco down, as soon as they come out of the treatment center, before they even get to the bus stop, they bummed a smoke from somebody waiting for the bus. And so stopping smoking at a treatment center isn't enough to treat tobacco addiction. It's far more profound than that. And the West Coast people are really onto something. And I think if we all got together, we could come up with a formula where we do this. But I've gone to 100 treatment centers in the U.S. as a trainer, and not one of them treat tobacco. And they're supposed to be the best treatment centers in the world, like the Refuge.
So
And,
what do you feel needs to happen to help somebody treat the addiction part of that? So, I've often said there's way more to quitting than quitting, which is essentially what you're saying with that. So,
yes.
what's different? Is there anything different between developing the skills to treat nicotine addiction to a different drug?
Well, one thing I can say to you there is that in Alcoholics Anonymous in Canada, after about the 5th year of recovery, people spontaneously quit smoking. So they can use the 12-step program. Once they actually grounded in it and work a program, they can do that. biggest problem with tobacco addiction is the detox. It's 97% of people who try and quit smoking relapse before the 48th hour.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll tell you about an experiment Dr. Gold let me see when I was working at the College of Medicine at the University of Florida. It's the mice and rats have cocaine, heroin, and nicotine, and they're allowed to they keep going until they die.
Yeah.
On the cocaine, they won't take that last hit. On heroin, they won't take that last hit. But bang, they go up to nicotine and hit that bar, and they're dead. And they cannot stop because it's more powerful than heroin and cocaine put together. And if you notice, we did a study in our treatment center over 50 years now, and 94% of our residents smoke.
So
It's a little.
what do you think about cessation helps like Chantix and Nicorette and those nicotine sprays and all of those kinds of things? What's your position on those?
I think they're very valuable for many people. Many people with underlying mental health disorders do get a lot of help from the Chantix and those types of drugs. The vermiculene is a flower that grows in Switzerland, and that's that substance that what it does is it puts a coating around the neural receptor of the nicotine receptors in our brain. So when the desire is very, very much dull, so it slows down.
So very similar to methadone for heroin addiction, like it's an agonist.
It's more engineered and it's more targeted to the actual drug, verniculene. It's quite a breakthrough. And nicotine patches, I use a double patch program. In fact, we developed it with the Mayo Clinic in Rochester because we opened our first residential treatment program the same week they opened. And I saw it in the news, so I called them. And they were astounded by it because we were coming at it from a completely different end, and they were more medical. You know, it was addiction medicine for them, and to us it was cultural medicine. And we put the two together, and that's when I became very interested in science and the idea of medicine and the brain, the study of the brain. And so
I'm just reading questions here, but keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I love questions, but the brain, Dr. Gold taught me that tobacco addiction is a childhood brain disease. And it's progressive, just like alcohol. And it's the hardest drug they always say this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life other than burying my parents.
So,
and it was the same for me.
Rod's got a question.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Sorry, well, is it Chantix?
Champax.
Is that the...
Champax is the Canadian one, and
Okay.
the American one has a different name, but I can't remember what it is.
You might see this question from Terry. He says, Murray, can you explain how Chantix works? I tried it. My coworkers told me to stop. I was acting strange. I was dreaming about closing deals at my desk, knowing it was a dream, but couldn't get out of it. I never really slept well. This is an aid drug that he's speaking of,
Yes.
I assume?
You know, that when with that, if that person was at our clinic, we'd say, well, we'll cut the dose in half, and we'll take it early in the morning and not in the rest of the day so you can sleep. But it does have medical side effects that you have to be careful. The biggest one I've run into is depression and some suicide ideation, which is often underlying the personality disorders that addictions bring us, and it manifests with if we rely on the aids to do the work for us, we quickly get in trouble. They have to be the purpose, and I want to recover. So one of the things that I do, Rand and Rod, is I rent a monastery for 4 days, Thursday to Sunday, and I go home Sunday at noon when their families come, and we have a chat or circle with the families and the people trying to quit, and it's incredibly effective. And I tell them, get your blood nicotine levels up as high as you can get them. Do a 2-patch rotation. Put one on an hour before you wake up. And I ask them 3 questions. When did you start smoking? How long after you get up do you want a cigarette? And how many do you smoke on a very hard day? And from those 3 questions, I can, and perception. If I don't not with them on Zoom, I can still get that feeling of how to move next with, where to go, because they really, that's the moment they need help, and they decide I want to go for it, but I'm so scared. So you've got to learn how to be afraid and still act,
Yeah, and
still trust.
that's true for most addiction. We've got a good question. It says, "Love your show. If vaping is marketed towards youth, what about adults? Are they switching over to vaping as well because they believe it's safer than smoking?" So part of the promotion around vaping is that it's safer than smoking. I often say juggling knives is safer than smoking too, but that doesn't. So what's your read on that?
Well, I did have a lot of adults who came to my Wednesday program in the Ottawa Valley at the Renfrew Treatment Center, and virtually every one of them did quit, but a year later they were still on it. And many of them had lung problems. The problems with vaping is the way the compounds mitigate. It gets into your lungs and it makes it doesn't attack the alveoli like the nicotine from smoke does. It eats away. It's the popcorn lung, they call it.
Yeah, well, it also affects the cilia in the lungs, which reduces and that's not the nicotine. It's the oils that they vaporize. But so another question is, how important is attitude? Like culturally, we've developed the belief that quitting smoking is really hard. And I've worked with a lot of people with a variety of addictions, including nicotine. And what I've found, and it was true for me when I quit smoking, is I started to tell myself that this was way easier than I thought. And so how much does attitude play into people's capacity to stop?
Oh, it's everything. At every opening night, I have one or two people, a male and a female, and the age-appropriate group come in and just speak for 2-3 minutes. And once I'm done my introduction, the meeting takes over by the smokers asking the people who have recovered, "How did you do it?" And they said, "Well, we came to see Dr. Kelly, and he said, look, you're fighting for your life. It doesn't matter. You can't fail when you're fighting for your own life and the life of your children, because this drug is intergenerationally infective and dangerous and can not only cut years off your life, what it does is it takes your freedom away because you're not regulating, you're medicating.
Mm-hmm.
It's very dangerous if you get into recovery and still are medicating with tobacco, which is the norm in North America. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons we have such a high relapse rate. But it's attitudes, everything, Rand. I try and develop an understanding that I didn't believe I could do it when I started, but I got a mentor. His name was O.D. Lewis. O.D., that's a pretty good name for a mentor. And he said to me, look, you're going to go up to Kathmandu and you're going to try and hike the mountain. You're not going to just show up, are you? No, I said, we've got to train. Oh, okay. So you better do the same thing. So preparation, I like to have the quit day. They pick the quit day, not me. They decide which part of the program they want to take. The one thing I won't do, though, is deal with the addiction in them. They can't do it, so I have to do that for them. So I build a relationship with them. I tell them I'll never judge them, as no matter how many times you relapse, because if I don't, they don't come back. They're so full of shame.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the same with everything. With all the work that we do with people try to get into recovery is to get rid of that shame piece, to help them realize that this isn't them being a weak-willed or not good enough. It's really about we're here to accept you as you are and help you work through this.
Yes. Oh, no. Yeah, well, you're such a beautiful man, Rand, and you know so many things about this that it's such a great thing to talk to you about this. Because for a long time I was all alone. There wasn't anybody I could call. They were calling me from the University of Florida. And I did 5 courses, developed them for them, and taught them. I really enjoyed that, actually. And I learned a lot more than Sometimes I say to my clients, I learn more from your questions than I do from your answers. So ask me questions. Tell me what's really worrying you. What is going to happen if it's going to go bad if you don't smoke? It inevitably boils down to something around the regulation that I'll lose it. I'll yell at my wife, I'll yell at my husband or my kids. I'll feel so bad about that I'll immediately relapse.
Okay,
So try and
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry. So when you're using nicotine replacement, so patches and stuff like that, you're taking people through a slow process of tapering off the nicotine.
Yes.
So you're still giving them the nicotine, but you're breaking the rest of the habit, the getting the lighter out, getting that sort of whole ritual going, which is a motivational piece of smoking. So you get rid of that. And then how long do you kind of go through that tapering off process with people?
That's different for everyone, but the principle is to get your blood nicotine levels up until you're not jonesing, you're not withdrawing. And then use the lozenges as self-dosing, because that's what smokers do all day long. You smoke 20 cigarettes, you take 10 puffs, you have 200 brain hits a day. And it's very hard to get it. So the patch is very slow. The sprayer is quicker. It's 2 minutes. And so that's more close to a hit from a cigarette. But the lozenges are the best. They really work. You can go from 4 milligrams to 2 milligrams. Your patch can go 21, 14. You can go from 2 patch down to 1. And nobody gets up in the morning and says, oh, I can't wait to put on the patch. They get up to put on the patch an hour before, because I've asked them, when did you quit smoking? They said 11, 12, 13. I know they've got some kind of a child issue there or a transfer issue and no regulating skills. And how after, they almost always say, I want a cigarette as soon as I get up. Well, I can't afford to have them wake up strategically. So I asked them to set their alarm an hour, put the patch on, and when they get up, they've got nicotine in their blood levels higher than a cigarette. So around 4 hours later, they put on another patch. So they get through the day. Now, if they need some at night, they can put on a 7. Because the same thing happens with the patch at night as happens with the vapor.
We got to cut to commercial, Murray, but hang around because we've got some more questions and we might bring you in here after. So.
Okay.
Perfect. That's good. Okay, we'll be right back with the Recovery Hour tonight, episode 31 on Facebook Live and YouTube Live.
Thanks.
All right, the Recovery Hour continues. Yeah, sorry, Rand, I was going to say episode number 31, presented in part by SGI. And, Dr. Murray Kelly with us from Ottawa. I was going to jump in with something, but you go ahead, Rand.
I wanted to cut to the shirt.
Here.
We've got something to give away here. So Bruce Robinson, a Lumsden Fellow, started this program a few years ago. He'd give people $1,000 to quit if they'd quit smoking for a year. And it was interesting and somewhat effective. But he printed a bunch of these shirts, and so anybody that sends in questions, we'll do a draw afterwards, and we've got half a dozen shirts we will send to you. So if you want to post your excuses on your chest, here's a chance to do that. Back to you.
All right. Outstanding. Good stuff. Yeah, write him in. Murray, here's my thing. You're a captivating speaker, obviously. That's why I was very much looking forward to tonight's show. You have not disappointed. You came in hot by saying this is the most powerful drug man has ever seen, and my mind's been reeling ever since. But for the parents of the teens that are vaping now and they have a problem on their hands with that, for a variety of reasons, what would you say to the parents that are trying to get their kids off of this?
Well, I'd say just encourage your kids to see if they can get, first of all, recognize that maybe the regulation skills didn't come in that family. Parents could actually get help. They could call someone like Rand or me. And we like to do parents and student nights together or weekends together. And it's very effective when the family closes. We don't want to make the child feel like they're a problem, that they've got problems. They may have problems, but they themselves are not the problem. And just to avoid that at all costs, to identify why are you doing it, what do you get out of it, that's the beginning. And then understand that you really are fighting for your life. This is such a dangerous thing to do. And it gets you through school, and your colleagues, your peers, to your peers, and it becomes more important than your family in many ways. So a peer group approach that Rand uses in schools, I think, is very valuable as well, probably the most valuable way. And I had a group of 55 students, 13 to 14-year-olds, half of them vape. They also, by the way, I wanted to mention this, they also, even the vapors, put tobacco in their joint. And this is a really, really dangerous to be vaping and sucking tobacco into that when you're trying to get high using pot or hash.
Yeah, I think they call them poppers these days. I think that's the terminology for them. We had a question from Terry. I don't know where it went, but basically it said he was told that there it is, idle hands are the devil's playground. Is part of addiction and recovery about learning to do something else with your hands and your time?
Yes, well, one of the big things that we learned is that this hand-to-mouth thing with the smoke and with the vape is very important to a smoker. And so we cut straws. We get them from McDonald's. They probably don't know they're helping people all across Canada quit smoking. But
so you're stealing straws?
Yeah, basically, I'm advising them to commit a crime. But it's very, after a while, I'll tell you a little story. My wife and I quit 2 weeks. She helped me. Then she quit, and I helped her for 2 weeks. And I got into this sucking on the straws. And 8 months went by. I didn't feel like I wanted a cigarette, but I couldn't get off the straw. I was addicted to them. And so the habitual motion of going, and after a while, the oxygen, if you smoke, if you have 2 or 3 pulls of air, and you get a buzz. And I told the kids that, they went, hey, thanks, Dr. Kelly, teaching us how to get a buzz from oxygen. And they really liked that. They had something to play with, something with your hands. Now, of course, it's all, cell phone. So we've got apps on that we can give them that constantly rhythm of the various things. They can play games. They can themselves in many ways.
Yeah.
And if you understand that when your mind's occupied with something else, it doesn't want anything. It doesn't need anything.
So
as soon as it yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were done.
No, well, I'm never done. I'm Irish.
So we got a comment from Bruce, who is the fellow responsible for the shirts. He said most quit by deciding on a certain day, say a birthday or Halloween, that they can remember. Oh, there it is in front of me.
Yes.
And so is that important? Like picking a day that has some significance to you?
Definitely. And for those who don't have any significant days, I say every Sunday night at midnight is quit day. If you have this, is this what you're working on? I tell them don't put it too far away and not so close that it panics you. So you can get comfortable with the idea that you're going to recover from tobacco addiction. And it's a very powerful addiction. You're fighting for your life. You can't fail. There's no shame in survival. And all you did as a kid is to smoke to survive, basically, in a group or coping with life at home. So they really love positive reinforcement, and I think a meaningful day is a very good idea. Very, very good. Very effective.
So we had a comment, there's a couple here. I personally find that smoking is very much a mental problem as well. And from my experience and from talking to literally thousands of smokers for the last 30 years. So it's a, like we were talking before, it's a significant emotional crutch for lots of people. And so thinking that it's going to be really hard to quit, I think makes that worse. If we can start to help people understand that it's easier than they've been told, I think that can help shift that energy a little bit. And there was one more question. We're just about out of time here, Murray, but that's the only one I can't see anymore. So, Rod, do you have anything else you want to ask, or Murray, do you want to say anything to wrap this up?
Yeah, I was in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, doing a workshop once, and I went around the group, and I got to this man who said, and he had to push himself up off the table to breathe. And I said, "Sir, is there anything I'm saying or doing that's causing it?" "Oh, no," he said. "I've got lung cancer, and I only have 3 weeks to live." And just then, a young lady from Manhattan who was in the group said, "You ought to get out and snort coke and start smoking Marlboro." And he said, looked over at her and he said, "Little missy, I only have 3 weeks to live as a free man. You wouldn't want to take that away from me, would you?" And that was the night I realized I'm in the freedom business. I'm in the selling freedom business, and that's what I sell, Rand. That's what you want to be free. Everybody wants to be free. Come together. We can do this together. You're not alone.
Perfect. Thank you, Murray. Appreciate you spending time
Great
with us.
job, Murray. See you Friday.
Thanks, guys. See you Friday.
Thanks, Rod.
You betcha. We are taking a break and we're coming back for one more segment, correct? And I think we might even be bringing somebody else in. We will be right back for our final segment. Get your questions and comments in. You're watching the Recovery Hour on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. All right, it is the final segment of the Recovery Hour on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Episode number 31 has been a fantastic one. We started out talking about empathy and now moseyed on over to smoking and vaping. And Rand, where do you want to wind this up? I will say one thing about the smoking as it relates to addiction. You know the number one weapon against addiction is prevention.
Yeah.
That's still a thing. That still works, right?
Yeah, it does. And that when we started, we talked about how the prevention programs really helped youth move away from cigarettes. And so if we need to do the same thing with vaping, and the government and the PSA people who do anti-smoking information are behind the vape technology people. We sort of started late. And so there's lots of education pieces that we need to work on. Those 4 questions that I've been trying to hammer into people's heads or get tattooed on their arms for years. Is what you're thinking true? Is it really true? Because we lie to ourselves. How are you feeling or acting because of how you were thinking? And how would you feel or act if you changed that thought? If you think that it's really hard to quit smoking, it's going to be really hard to quit. If you think this is easier than I thought, that gives you a leg up. There's a question that just popped up there. Is going cold turkey the best way? And, I think people have to figure out what's going to work for them. That worked for me. And I smoked for 15 years. And I'm unfortunate that I quit when I was like 25. And I had tried cutting down. I didn't have this was like a long time ago. I didn't have quit smoking aids. So I tried cutting down and that didn't work. But I've seen lots of people have lots of success with the nicotine patch. You are still servicing that addiction, but you start to break some of the habits. You start to break the tearing over the package, the getting the lighter out, the sparking the lighter, all of those things that are a significant piece of the ritual of smoking. As you start to break them, then you start to decrease the intensity of that habit. Anticipatory dopamine, which is the thing that pushes us to want to do something, is a significant part of tobacco addiction, nicotine addiction, or any other addiction. We get almost excited about going to do it as we get to do it. The other thing that I think it's important to understand, and Murray talked about it really well, is that really rapid withdrawal cycle that you get into from nicotine, because it has a really short half-life. Like the nicotine hit that you get is strong and noticeable. People think it's not as bad as other drugs because it doesn't impair you the same way too much alcohol does or too much marijuana does. But it signals your brain. It increases adrenaline. It increases insulin in your system. So it raises your blood sugar, so you don't get hungry, and so it misaligns a whole bunch of different body systems, and we get used to that. And then as soon as the nicotine drops, that withdrawal starts, and the quickest way to stop withdrawal is to access the drug again. And that's the huge issue with vapes, is that they're so accessible and so easy to use that it doesn't take nearly the effort it does of smoking cigarettes. And I'm not suggesting people should start smoking cigarettes. And so the nicotine replacement stuff allows you to slowly start to break some of the other habit pieces and taper off in a little more controlled fashion. So I don't think it's a bad idea.
No, well, the interesting thing, and we only have a couple minutes left here with the question from the viewer, I think it was Terry, about the idle hands or the devil's playground or the devil's workshop. And Murray said, well, you ask somebody why they started this behavior or substance. That's just one of many reasons, right? I think there's 5, 6, or 7 reasons why people started a specific use or behavior, right?
Yeah.
Boredom's one, it looks cool, this or that. But you need to start somewhere. Because we ask all those questions when we sit down with somebody, right?
Yeah.
Why did you start drinking? Why did you start smoking? And I don't know.
Yeah.
The reasons generally aren't that good. You know what I mean? That's why I'm hammering the prevention piece, right? It's just to stop and kind of look at. There's a lot of reasons why people start something, but to start quitting, you just need to take that first step, I guess is the point.
And I think there's a huge education piece involved in it. Like the vape companies have pushed vapes as safer than smoking. And there's really no research that supports that. We don't have long-term research on the impact of regular vaping on lungs, on blood pressure, on anything, because it's new. And so as some of that research develops and we can start to recognize and talk about more of the risks, that will help us better educate people, because that's what happened with cigarettes. I mean, when I was a kid, I'm sure I got like ash burns on the top of my head because my mom would be breastfeeding me and smoking a cigarette. And I can remember going into movie theaters and everybody was smoking, and you'd go into your doctor's office and he'd be smoking, and like it was crazy. But no,
Well, my mom said nobody thought it wasn't safe. Nobody told them they wasn't safe.
Well, and that's exactly where we're at with this vape stuff, except there's been more misinformation saying that it is. And I mean, and the other huge issue with teens is that very subtle peer pressure. Like if you're with 10 kids and 8 of them are vaping and you're not, there's some really subtle pressure. If I want to be included in this group, I have to do that, particularly if your self-esteem is a little bit lower. I'm just checking the comments here. Bruce also said, my experience with quitting cold turkey seems to work well if you're ready. And we'll remember that day forever. So, and I think that speaks to what we were saying before too. Like, most people know they should quit. That's way different than I want to quit. So, if
absolutely.
Yep. And so helping people develop that motivation I want to do this for me, so that I can feel better, so that I'm not, as Murray said, a prisoner to this thing. I want to be free. I don't want to have to do that to feel okay.
Liked him saying that he's in the freedom business, aren't we all?
Yes.
Well, a lot to digest coming out of this program. I would suggest anybody be like me and check out mentalhealthweek.ca. I cannot wait to delve into that and use the hashtag #GetReal. Wonderful guest, whoever's idea was to bring on Dr. Murray Kelly. I loved it, and we'll see everybody next month. Any last words, Rand?
No, just be careful out there. It's a dangerous world.
Is it ever, unfortunately. We'll see you next month here on
Thanks,
Facebook
Rod. Good to
Live
see
and
you.
YouTube Live. Thank you, as always.